Hello and welcome. I have a cat. I don't know if you can see her. Hi. Anyway, today I thought we'd talk about how I got into... That was Orby. How I got into pet rats. So I've mentioned it a couple times before, but I've never really gone into detail about how I ended up having rats. So let's just talk about it a bit. So I have rats. I've had rats since I was 16 years old. I got my first rats in 2009. Hi, baby. Hi. Basically, my teacher brought her pet rats in. So I had a teacher that I had the year before, but I wasn't particularly close with her or anything. But my friend really liked her. She's like, well, let's go say hi to this teacher. And so we went in, and she had a small cage sitting on the edge of her desk. And my friend was just like, what's in there? And she's like, oh, it's rats. And I went over to check it out because of course I did. And she just popped the cage open and plopped a rat onto my chest. Her name was Oreo. She was, I believe, a mink rex, hooded. And I looked down at her and she looked up at me, and I was just like, oh no. I fell in love with her immediately. And her other rat was named Skittles, and she was a Russian blue hooded. They were both from pet stores, probably PetSmart would be my guess. Although back then both PetSmart and Petco in Arizona carried rats. Neither do as of now, unless that's changed since I moved. And they stopped carrying rats like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. The reason this is going to be a whole video is basically because I have been thinking about that situation a lot. And so I decided to make a video on it. So while it worked out for me, obviously, with the rats, there were a lot of other kids. That teacher had 6 classes a day of 30 to 40 students each. That's a lot of kids, and the rats were there all day with her. She would free roam with them. And it wasn't honestly an ideal situation for her rats, the kids who got rats, or her, to be perfectly honest. So yeah. So let's start with like those of us who got rats. Obviously, I've had rats for 15 and a half, almost 16 years now. And I've had over 50. I currently have 20. I've obviously not always had as many as I currently have. And I can do a video on how I ended up with so many rats if y'all are interested. But yeah, it worked out for me. It worked out for my friend Kendra, who has had rats on and off for 13 years now, I believe. And then Cappy wasn't part of that group. I did know her in high school, but she wasn't part of that group. And she didn't get rats till 2020. But it worked out for her because obviously she has rats because Kendra and I have rats. But the other girls, not so much. First of all, it was only girls who got rats, which I do think is funny. But the other girls who got rats, one of them did fine. Like, she got boy rats, and she took pretty good care of them, and she got to keep them, which was great. But specifically 2 other girls I want to talk about. We'll start with one that has like a bit of a short story, which is that basically her parents were going through a divorce, and one of them wanted to win favor, is my guess. And they told her she could get rats. So she went and she got 2 baby rats. She named them Dusty and Stormy. And essentially she had them for a little over 2 weeks, I think. And then whichever parent decided she could get rats changed their mind because they didn't want them in the house anymore. And again, all of us got pet store rats. I feel like that's important to mention. All of us got rats from pet stores. But then at that point, the other parent was just like, oh, you can't bring them here either. So they ended up, I don't know what ultimately happened with them because this is right before I graduated. Ultimately, I believe they ended up going to my teacher, which I will talk about a little bit more later. Now, the other girl, this is the really bad part, in my opinion. So the other girl who had rats, who got rats, she loved them a lot. She should not have had rats. She simply should not have had rats. So basically she got 2 rats by convincing her boyfriend, who lived out on his own, to get rats because her parents told her no. So she went and she got 2 girls. She named them Kit Kat and Diamond. They were really pretty. Kit Kat was a fawn. I think she was Dumbo too. And then Diamond was Champagne, both hooded. They were from, I think, PetSmart. My first rats were from Petco. Her rats were from PetSmart, I believe. And, you know, the issues started cropping up pretty early on. Starting with, she had it in her head, she and the girl who had boy rats had it in their heads that they were going to breed their rats. And if there are two rats that should not be bred, it is two rats that are from a pet store and owned by teenage girls. Under no circumstances should teenagers be breeding their pet store pets. None. None whatsoever. And then, thankfully, they didn't end up doing that because they just never got around to it, is my guess, because of everything else I'm about to talk about. But the problems kept cropping up after that because they would overfeed them stuff. I remember they just kept feeding them carrot after carrot until they got diarrhea because they thought it was cute to watch them eat carrots. And then they put Mountain Dew in their water bottles because they thought that was funny, which do not give your rat carbonated beverages. It's not good for them. Mountain Dew, definitely don't give them Mountain Dew. And then it was that kind of stuff that they would do. And they would also bring them to school with them, which I will get to a little bit later when I'm talking about the teacher, but that's also not a great idea, to be honest. But beyond that, it got worse because this girl ended up breaking up with her boyfriend, and he had the rats at his place. And he didn't want the rats. He never wanted the rats. He only got them because she begged him to get them. And so they were with him for a few weeks, and he did not clean their cage. I don't know if he fed them. I'm pretty sure he gave them water at least, but basically by the time she got them back, he brought them into the school for the teacher to take care of or to deliver back to this girl. And they were very neglected. And I remember going over and taking them out, and they were just like very unsure of people all of a sudden. They were very social before, or at least Kit Kat was. Everyone loved Kit Kat, no one liked Diamond. It was really sad, honestly. I liked Diamond. But, yeah, and I remember we had to like basically re-socialize them because they were just kind of scared. They had been neglected. So, moving along, this girl's parents still told her she could not have rats, and summer was coming up, so she had to figure out what to do with Kit Kat and Diamond. And so one of her friends' parents said that she could keep them for the summer. So that girl took Kit Kat and Diamond home for the summer. And I remember it was the first day of my senior year. We got back into school. I went to see this teacher, and Kit Kat and Diamond were there. And the teacher said that while that girl had been hoping that her parents would change their mind, they had not. And it was unfortunate because she had bonded a lot with specifically Kit Kat, because everyone liked Kit Kat, no one liked Diamond, because Diamond was a little bit more reserved. So Diamond never got attention. She almost never got attention unless it was me or Kendra who were giving her attention. And that is a bummer. Like, Kendra and I made a point of giving Diamond attention whenever she was there. But because her parents didn't change her mind, that girl, Kit Kat and Diamond were now back with the teacher. And the stress affected Kit Kat a bit. The teacher thought that she had bonded so much with the girl that she was depressed that she was no longer there, but considering what happened shortly after this, I believe that these were just the early symptoms of a pituitary tumor, because Kit Kat did develop a pituitary tumor within a few weeks of the start of the school year. She was not even a year and a half, maybe just a year old at this point, but pet store rats, you know. And it was unfortunate because since the original owner couldn't take them, the second girl couldn't take them, they ended up with the teacher. And the thing is, I remember so clearly sitting on a desk and I was holding Kit Kat. She was giving me kisses, and this was shortly after she got back from being at the girl's house all summer. And the teacher looked at me, like, very clearly. She's like, oh, she's bonding with you. And she basically tried to get me to take Kit Kat and Diamond. And at this point, I had 3 rats of my own, and I would have had to have a separate cage for them because I didn't know how to bond them. I didn't know what to do or anything like that. And I didn't really want them. I liked them, but they weren't my rats. I had my rats, and I didn't really want these other rats. But I remember her trying to get me to take them and feeling so horrendously guilty when I said no. And that guilt is something I have carried my entire life from that point on, because since the teacher had to take them, she also did not like them because for some reason they brought all the rats together for a play date. I don't know if you can hear about that, but that's Warren. It's okay, baby. And you can't have a play date with rats if you don't do an actual bonding session, like intros, then they are going to try and do it themselves. So basically, Kit Kat was the most dominant of the 4 rats, the teachers 2, and then of those 2. And so she was trying to assert herself, especially because they were in a wide open space. They were meeting for the first time. So she was a little bit of a bully, which is not her fault. It is just rat behavior. And, you know, it is what it is. But the teacher did not like them because of this. And so when Kit Kat started developing more and more symptoms of a pituitary tumor, she did not do anything. She did not take her to the vet. She did not take care of her. She did not put her to sleep. She just left them at her house and didn't even bring them in because she didn't like them. And she said this to us as if that was like a reasonable thing to do, which I have always hated. And unfortunately, Kit Kat did end up passing away from the pituitary tumor in her cage. And if you know anything about pituitary tumors, that has to be the most brutal way to let a rat pass. And now after that, this teacher still had Diamond, and she did not like Diamond, so she did not try bonding Diamond with her existing rat. At that point, the teacher only had 1 rat, which I'll get into. But she didn't bother trying because she didn't like Diamond, so she left Diamond in her cage alone all day, every day. And Diamond ended up getting quite obese. She developed bumblefoot because of it. And when the teacher eventually started bringing Diamond back into school, which was only after she got herself a rat, and she had bonded that rat to Diamond because why not, I guess. She wanted her rat to have friends. Kendra and I would take Diamond out and we'd give her attention, and she would just soak it up because she was alone, she was depressed, she was not doing great. And that is unfortunate, and that's why it has stuck with me for so long. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video, just to kind of talk about why kids should not be allowed to have pet rats and why I don't think classroom animals should be a thing. Just to clarify real quick, what I mean by kids shouldn't be allowed to have animals, I mean that they shouldn't be allowed to have pets that they are the sole caretaker for, because kids, even teenagers, are notoriously really bad at taking care of animals. And as for the classroom pet thing, I still believe that. One of the other teachers in my school had sugar gliders, and I can't think of a worse pet to have in a classroom. Because this kind of thing happens. And then there's the teacher's pets, which, like, you shouldn't bring your rats to environments you can't control for the reasons I'm about to get into. So let's start with the fact that this teacher in her rolling chair would roll over their feet and tails pretty frequently because she'd let them free roam the entire room. She also had ferrets, and she'd bring her ferrets in, and they would just, like, walk out the door constantly. She had a rabbit that she'd bring in, which I don't think is a good idea. Keep in mind, she had 6 classes of 30 to 40 students every single day, and all those students have pets, have walked outside, have been around people she didn't know, and they could be bringing in any sort of disease into her classroom that could then pass to her pets. So, honestly, she was very lucky that nothing worse happened. Like, for example, Bordetella or some other very easily communicable disease between animals that would just wipe out all of her pets. Because at home she also had cats and dogs. So, she got lucky in that regard. She did not get lucky in the regard that one day one of the students stepped on one of her pet rats by accident. And this girl was mortified. She felt so bad. Like, she had to leave school the next day because she was so upset about it. And the rat survived this, not because she should have, but because my teacher wasn't good at saying goodbye to her pets. She would always let them just kind of keep going for a long time. So that one was Skittles that got stepped on. And she survived for a little while after that, but she did eventually succumb to her injuries. And then with Oreo, what happened was she got a tumor, and the teacher told us that tumors couldn't be removed in rats, which if you've seen anything on my channel, you know is not true. Wasn't even true back then. Has never been true. But that brings me to the further point, is that all of us students were learning from the teacher, and the teacher did not know what she was talking about. So basically, all of us made basically the same mistakes. Like, none of our rats had a good diet. None of them had proper cage setups when we first started. We all got multiple rats. We all did that one thing right, but we all also got baby rats to put with adult rats. Like, I had Psycho, who was 2 or 3 months younger than Boo and Shriek. Those were my first 3 rats, and I just popped her in immediately without even doing proper intros. I'm so lucky it worked out. But I basically made every mistake in the book because I didn't know better. That's one reason we make these videos, so people can learn. And I did learn, obviously. Like, I have much better setups. I have a great diet for my rats. I wish my care could have always been where it is now. And I have done so much better since I started to learn more. I improved a ton. Kendra did the same. I don't think any of the other girls still have rats. Most of them didn't have rats by the time I left school, to be honest. But basically the point of this video was to just kind of tell you how I got into rats, which was through my teacher. After I met Oreo and Skittles, I got my first rats, which were Boo and Shriek. I don't have very many good pictures of them because this was 2009 and I didn't have a camera. But even when I did get like cameras on the phone, they weren't great, and I never really thought to take pictures of the rats. It just didn't occur to me. That's actually why I started my Instagram, is because I wanted to be better about that. So I was just like, I'll start an Instagram and I'll just put all the pictures there and maybe it'll motivate me. And it did, and I have tons of pictures of my rats, which I love now. But I got Boo and Shriek, and eventually, like a couple months later, my mom surprised me with Psycho. My parents were actually going to surprise me with rats after they found out I was interested. I basically, 2 weeks after I met Oreo and Skittles, I was like, can I have rats? And my dad was like, I despise what you're saying right now. But they were going to surprise me with some, but my mom went to the pet store. And basically the PetSmart, which was the pet store near us, had male rats at the time. And she never explicitly said this, but what else could it be? She looked at them and she saw their balls and it put her off so bad she told me I could never have boys, which I now have 4 boys, so. But I got Boo and Shriek shortly after that, and I've had rats basically the entire time since then. The longest I've gone without rats is not even 2 full days. So while it wasn't like the most ideal circumstances to get into keeping rats, I do feel like I've made the most of it. And I've improved a ton from what it was like back then. But yeah, you shouldn't take your rats to a school environment because anything could happen to them, including injuries, being stolen, getting diseases. And you should also be very careful introducing kids, like anyone under, I'd say 18, to the idea of rats, because they do not have full control over those pets, and things can happen. Like, you end up getting 4 rats dumped on you in 2 years because students got rats that they couldn't take care of, or you end up neglecting rats that didn't deserve it. So yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!